Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Stacey.
And I'm your co-host, Sarah.
Today we are talking about Sweden.
Sweden, yay.
Which, just to get it out there, and I don't mean to be insulting, the Scandinavia Nordic countries are like the Midwest states. They're there, and I could possibly name them, but I couldn't really tell you which one is which or what differentiates them.
And that's hilarious because when I think of, like, Norwegians, there's a lot of Norwegians in the Midwest, like in Minnesota.
Right. Yeah.
So that's hilarious that's the analogy that you make.
There wasn't I'm not saying it's because of the Scandinavian people. It's just those... I'm going to blame geography. It was the way... Actually, I didn't really get taught formal geography. So, yeah.
Right. Well, some of my ancestry is Norwegian, so I am a little bit familiar with the Nordic states. And the fact that Norway, I don't know if Norway and Sweden do, but Norwegians and Swedes here sometimes have like a friendly rivalry kind of thing, a little bit like Montana and North Dakota.
Right.
Notice how I said North Dakota.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, we're Norwegian, they're Swedish.
Yes.
It's just hilarious, but I don't personally have anything against Sweden or Swedes. Hi, Sweden!
I don't even know very much about Sweden. I only recently started hearing about it and can only finally name the four major Scandinavian countries and maybe possibly their positions on a map within a 50-50 shot, because for the past few years, Huga was a big thing, which looks like it should be pronounced Hige, but that whole thing. And then I was reading on that, and that led me to Lagom, which is actually Swedish, which is sort of the idea of balance, which totally goes for me because I really like that just as a sort of life goal. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I remember reading the book on Lagom and the thing about the land and being able to go on land. And then I also remember reading A Man Called Ove, which is not how that's pronounced either, but that's also how it looks. And I'm like, that's it. That's my only thing of Sweden.
Uve?
Uve? But that's how my book club eventually decided to call it, was Uve.
Okay. I've heard it pronounced Uve, but I don't know the correct way to pronounce it.
It looks like Ove, and this is more of a just... continuing my language rants, they all use Latin letters, and yet we can't decide what these Latin letters sound like. It's just like, it's not even like, translating something that uses a completely different alphabet into Latin letters, and therefore that's all kind of crazy. Like, Tai Chi for some odd reason, and Chi is spelled Qi. It's like, who decided that's how you spell that sound? What the heck? That's not even, it's like we all use the same alphabet, and why is that how you say that's how...
Yeah.
Language people.
Now, some people, when they think of Sweden, might just think of IKEA.
I know. Or ABBA.
Yes.
But yes, so there is much more to Sweden.
There's much more than just
all
IKEA
of that, even
ABBA.
if I can't necessarily particularly point out which one is Sweden on a map. I can kind of circle the general area. I know it's, up there and north and to the right.
Up there, and, they kind of come down like fingers.
Right. Like, I wouldn't, look at Thailand and be like, Sweden. I got the general area. But then the particularities, kind of confusing. So, to start with, Sweden borders Norway to the west and north, and Finland to the east, and is connected to Denmark in the southwest by a bridge tunnel. That's probably not useful to you unless you are actually looking at a lined map of those four countries. But if you kind of have the general area, you now kind of get which one's which.
A bridge tunnel. For some reason, to me, that sounds like an oxymoron. a bridge to me it goes
right.
over and a tunnel goes up. But interesting. Okay.
But if you think of a bridge as just a way to cross water,
right,
a bridge tunnel is a real thing, I guess.
Sure.
Sweden is the third largest country in the European Union by area, and is the largest of the Nordic countries, although I'm a little confused of the way I saw that worded, whether that's by area or by population. But it's the largest somehow of the Nordic countries. It has a total population of about 10 million or so, of which actually about 1/5, 2 million, has a foreign background, which is very interesting. Because, hey, that's not a lot of people, period. We're from California. That's like, whatever. That's like LA, isn't it? I don't even know. But also, like, 1/5 of your population is either foreign born or has like a foreign born parent.
Interesting.
That's,
yeah.
For the whole country, that's quite amazing. Because again, we all think of Sweden as like, tall blonde ABBA people with IKEA. No offense, Sweden, really. That's just the stupid American stereotype we're trying to discredit here.
Right.
So Sweden, and I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about Lagan, but I couldn't remember the word, and I'm totally also going to butcher this, has this thing called Allemansraden, which I remember Alleman is like German for people or something, right?
I think so. And now I'm trying to look and see in the notes that you're looking at what the word is.
I don't know what umlaut over A means, but Allemansraden. So I'm going to completely, not with any etymological background whatsoever, say that's something like people's right. Because what it is, it translates to right of public access. It grants everybody a right to move freely in nature on foot, swimming, by horse, by ski, by bicycle, or by rowing boat, but not driving, even on other people's private property, but not in private lawns or gardens. So if and I know this is the case in many parts of America where it's like the land is owned, but you have no idea by who, because they don't live on it and they don't do anything with it. It's just, you can't be on my land because it's my land and I put up a fence that I haven't been to in, a decade or whatever. In Sweden, you can still go on that land and like have a picnic or pick berries or what you want.
And you won't be confronted by an angry person with a shotgun?
Theoretically, no.
I'm just thinking again, growing up in Montana, you don't cross the fence line of somebody's property you don't know. There could be a shotgun involved.
So, yeah, theoretically, no shotguns, hopefully.
Hopefully.
I would hope not. But I think that's really cool. And you're expected to, like, if you go on a picnic, pick up your trash.
Right, I would hope so. Be respectful, yeah.
And it's only for within a certain number. So if it's like, you wanted to do a Woodstock sort of in Sweden.
That's what I was thinking, Woodstock.
You'd have to sort of, go through much more to make sure, and that's to, make sure you're not damaging the land or, over flooding it with sewage or what have you. Mm-hmm. But if it's like you and 3 friends and you want to camp out there.
Oh, nice.
Go for it.
Okay. So we actually, I'm the girl that looks stuff up. So I was looking things up, and one video says Uve. Uve. So anyway, it has nothing to do with anything. I just like to look stuff up.
I kind of want to go on a side rant of why don't we all just use phonetic alphabet? But since phonetic alphabet I've tried to learn, it's actually kind of hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, Sweden. So we've got IKEA. We've got, what else did we say? IKEA. I thought there was something else.
ABBA.
Oh, ABBA. IKEA, ABBA, and the girl with the dragon tattoo.
Oh, is that Swedish?
Yeah.
I haven't read it or seen it, and now there's another one that's not from the original trilogy.
The Girl in the Spiderweb? Is that what it's called?
Caught in the Spiderweb or something. Yeah. Something like that.
Something like that. Not written by Stieg Larsson because he unfortunately died.
Right. Yeah. So
yes, those are in Sweden, and she actually does shop at IKEA occasionally in the which just made me laugh. I don't know why.
With that, I heard the shot, and I thought you was like shotgun. Something.
Oh no!
I was like, wow, really? I mean, I know she's edgy, but wow. Okay, but yeah, so Sweden has this right to land and is a very good place if you are a sort of outdoorsy person. It's got really good skiing and hiking, canoeing, cycling, sailing, horse riding keeps coming up, and I'm just like. That's not my first thought of Sweden is horses or people on horses, but...
Oh, but something that you see a lot are these little decorated horses, and I can't remember what they're called. There's a specific
the little
name.
red painted ones.
Yeah, or blue, kind of... here, and I don't. And again, I'm coming from an American perspective.
Right.
Often, red is associated with Norwegian things, and blue is associated with Swedish things. I don't know why. It just
even
kind of
more
is.
so than locations. I don't try and get colors and
Yeah, I
fonts.
don't. So, but when I think of like, what are they called? My dad carves them. I should know. It doesn't matter. But so
Sarah's
I'm not
dad, she is totally failing at being your daughter right now.
I totally am. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm not surprised by horses just because, when they appear in art, you expect them to appear in culture, I would think. So, Anywho,
also the sort of Scandinavian countries, just in general.
It's been a day for making up new words.
It has. Again, language rant that I will not do. Are known to be sort of, with the social welfare state, but most Swedes have liberal, cosmopolitan, secular, and environmentalist values, so there would be less of a culture clash than if you went to, a very conservative, religious country.
Okay.
Like, most Swedes aren't really religious, actually. Mm-hmm. So I think that's good, because I feel like for most of the places we've been, it's been a lot of like, yeah, be careful when you go here. Like, it looks great, and it's got this amazing thing you want to see, but also be careful. And with Sweden, it's like, it'll probably feel pretty familiar, save for you won't understand the language rant. But beyond that, it's like, hey, this is Europe, and this is very familiar, and they're very cosmopolitan, so not as much of a culture shock, theoretically.
Cool.
Also, not as much of a money shock. Because in some places, you can't use your card, even though I never have cash in America.
Right.
Because I can use my card everywhere, so I'd really struggle with that in a foreign country. In Sweden, you definitely can use your card a lot of places, but there was a warning that PIN pads are more widely used than signatures, even for credit cards. So you should know your PIN pad before you go, which would totally throw me off, because I don't know that I've ever known my PIN pad, my PIN for my credit card.
Oh,
because I've never used it for my credit card.
Right.
It's like, I know it for my debit card, but I have a PIN for my credit card. Really? Yeah. So we're going to take a short break, and I will try and go figure out what that might be. And when we come back, we'll be talking about the Hanseatic town of Visby. And we will also look up actually how to pronounce Hanseatic. Stay tuned.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. It is Hanseatic. I got one out of the however many foreign words I've tried to say so far this episode. I got one without looking it up, and then looked it up to confirm.
Just love that somebody out there in the world makes 15-second videos of how to pronounce words. Like, you can type in blah, blah, blah pronunciation, and there will be a video of somebody saying,
this is a very
blah, blah,
necessary
blah.
need in the world.
It is.
Somebody has to do it.
I don't know. There's probably not that many who are as nerdy as we are and get excited about these things.
I feel this is one of those things you look up randomly like every 5 years or so, and then you're pissed when it's not on the internet.
Well, yeah.
And so someone was pissed enough, they're like, I will do it. Yes. It's that. So Visby, the Hanseatic town of Visby, which is one of my favorites, a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Excellent.
It is a former Viking site on the island of Gotland, and was the main center of the Hanseatic League in the Baltic from the 12th to 14th century.
Okay, and for all the marbles, what was the Hanseatic League?
That I don't know, but I was just so proud that I knew how to pronounce Hanseatic. I moved on, because what's really interesting about Visby is the sort of, it stayed the same since then, which is quite amazing, because I tend to think of the medieval period as actual literal Dark Ages and don't focus on it.
Right. Rats and plague and Dark Ages. Okay.
And also we don't have as much from it because everybody was dying of plague. And it's just like, okay, let's move on. Renaissance, let's go. Like, the Renaissance, nothing's before the Renaissance, right? There's no history before the Renaissance, even though technically, by definition, a Renaissance would require something before it. But it feels like you have ancient Greece and Rome, and then you just jump 1,500 years or so, and then till you get to the Renaissance.
Wow.
And I just tend to not focus on medieval stuff.
Well, for your general edification, the Hanseatic League was a commercial and defensive confederation of merchant guilds and market towns in northwestern and central Europe, founded in 1358.
Wow.
Thank you, Internet.
So it's like the northern medieval thing of the Italian city-states getting together?
Kind of sounds a little bit like that, except that they, Germanic, Middle Low German, instead of not Germanic.
Right. That. And also, not Renaissance. But anyway. So it has 13th century ramparts and more than 200 warehouses and dwellings from the same period, making it the best preserved fortified commercial city in Northern Europe.
Cool.
Which, if you look at it, it kind of feels like, and not that because I don't like this, so I've only seen the one episode, but it kind of feels like this is a place where you would shoot something like Outlander or something, if you want it without building it yourself, to go be like, let's go back to somewhere between 1700 and 1200, Visby.
Okay.
Because it's a walled town, and I'm actually surprised at how not tall that wall is. If you look at the pictures, I'm like, that looks kind of climb overable. But maybe that's just with my modern technology, and people who wouldn't have had the ability to make ladders of that sort wouldn't have been, I don't know. But that wall kind of looks climb overable. But that this is, that sort of medieval town. If you had the castle, which was not, the pretty princess fairy castle, but was for actual
defense,
fortification, so people couldn't get in. And then you kind of had the town and the wall, which I also think is very interesting, because there were people who lived outside the wall, and so when they were under attack, you had to quickly get in or
come in, right?
Die.
Yeah,
I was like that.
Well, because you have to have people that live outside the wall. That's where all the farms are,
right?
And the livestock and everything.
I think it's just I'm kind of spoiled of not having been born anywhere near that time, and so it's just that's dangerous, and oh my gosh, that's terrible. But that was life back then. That was just sort of the harshness that was everyday life, and you just kind of lived with it.
Unfortunately, you often had to live in kind of a terrible situation so you could have the protection of the walled city, because you were probably a serf or some equivalent of that.
But Visby is also very interesting because it maintains its medieval street plan, but it maintains it both above and below ground, and it evidently has a really amazing, I guess if you're into history, sort of sewer system. Which I'm not into sewers, and also I read all of Les Miserables, where there's a whole chapter on the Paris sewers.
Well, yeah.
And I'm now pissed about sewers just in general.
Now, I'm not sewers aren't my hobby or anything, but I am impressed when they have, because this is the 1300s,
right?
And so to have a system is pretty impressive in terms of engineering and all of that. I mean, so it's pretty cool. I don't need to go wander around there,
right?
But it is pretty cool that it's preserved and that somebody was smart enough to come up with it.
Yes. And Visby is actually a popular vacation destination for Scandinavians during the summer. So it's not just we're completely from nowhere around here sort of thing that only, real foreigners go to. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm actually just from, a few hours that way.
Except
Let's go to Visby.
1/5 of the population is either foreign born or has a foreign parent. So
that
still
also
you get
too.
There you go.
But yeah, so interestingly, which I love, and yet I'm trying to think, it's been many years since I've seen this, so I can't quite remember, that Visby is evidently the main visual inspiration for Kiki's Delivery Service, the town in Kiki's Delivery Service. Have you seen that?
I have not seen.
So Kiki's Delivery Service is one of the Miyazaki films.
Yes.
And it was the first one I saw because it played on, I think, Cartoon Network back in the 90s, and I didn't quite know anything about Miyazaki or animation. It was just okay, this is your version of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I don't quite understand, because Kiki is a witch and she has a cat, and she goes off at she looks, I thought she was 14, but it's been years since I've seen that movie, so I don't quite remember what age. But this is sort of a coming of age thing all witches do. They go off on their own to a totally different town to sort of make their way in the world, and she meets a sort of inventor boy who builds like a flying bicycle, and she saves people by something, and I really cannot remember. Been many, many years, but it's one of the, because I have a major problem, and I think I've mentioned this on one of the movie podcast episodes with Miyazaki's films, because I always feel like both the children and parents are way too relaxed about things that would terrify me.
Right.
But Kiki, I actually really quite liked, and maybe it's because it was my first. But just the fact that that was sort of the inspiration, I was like, okay, I really don't care about medieval thing, but I kind of want to go and see if I can see like a flying teenage witch or something. Or be the flying teenage witch who meets the cute dorky boy. Anyways, because I always have to have my sort of imaginary lovers in my travels.
Sure.
But this one, part of my don't like medieval thing is I really hate like time travel romances. Mm-hmm. Because my first thought is, okay, fine, so you fell in love, but you realize if you get married, you might get pregnant, and you don't have the medical care here, so you could easily die of like a gazillion different things.
Yes.
Why are we happy to be like 800 years in the past? I don't understand. So
love. That's why it's a romance.
Medieval. That's why it's called the Dark Ages. Like, there's a reason it's called the Dark Ages for so many reasons. But Visby, almost close to turning my thoughts towards at least neutral on that. It looks like a cool town, even if the walls are climb overable.
Well, and you don't have to go and time travel to get your imaginary lover. You can have a contemporary imaginary Visby lover.
But why would I have a contemporary lover in a medieval town?
Why not?
See, this is where we're getting back into Outlander all over again.
But Outlander's not medieval.
But I know, it feels medieval. It's just, I'm sure they're shooting a medieval castle, and we're way off topic.
We should take a break.
We should. The point being, Visby, UNESCO heritage site, popular in the summer with even Scandinavians.
Climb overable walls.
And Sweden is already sort of not culture shock enough, so very comfortable intro to something I normally would not have an interest in whatsoever. And now we will take a break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Our tip for today, somewhat connected to Sweden, not directly, but connected to Europe, and Sweden's in Europe. I know that much. So
good job.
Indirectly connected to Sweden, is to be careful about restricted foods when flying.
Okay.
So you probably heard the story about the woman who got charged $500 for an apple on her flight.
Oh, geez.
Because, bringing things. You should be very careful about bringing any meat or dairy products from a non-EU country into an EU country. A lot of those things are restricted, and therefore you could face a very hefty fine. Mm-hmm. Also, interestingly, many countries ban potatoes.
This is where your pickiness comes in handy, because you will just be bringing processed food, and you probably don't have to worry about that.
I mean, you are allowed a certain amount, actually, of non-processed foods for personal use, but I'm not sure how much of this is like we don't want, because my normal thing with restricted plants is like, invasive species. Mm-hmm. But I think this might also be about like food contamination and disease thing here of mad cow disease or foot disease or E. coli or what have you. Mm-hmm. Because the, EU versus America and their standards for food health and all that.
Right.
are different. So I think that's where it comes from. But yeah, I mean, on the one hand, okay, yeah, I don't want to bring in, random cheese or whatever. On the other hand, with my picky self, the chances that I will find a lot in Sweden or inter-country here that I will eat are slim, because my chances just of finding things I will eat in like an American store are slim. So problematic all around. But just for the non-picky eaters out there who would be like, yes, I'm totally up for anything. No meat, no dairy, no potatoes.
Right. I think probably a good rule of thumb is to just look it up and see what you're allowed to bring. I mean, if you have plans on bringing, I don't know, I'm just picturing, like, I don't need just random things like a giant salami or, I don't know.
Well, because I know people would probably want to bring their own stuff to not have to pay expensive price in, the airport or the airplane. On the other hand, it's like, is it less expensive to pay for the overpriced airplane food or to pay the fine for bringing in the thing I didn't know was restricted?
Right.
And the site for today, only tangentially related to that in the whole be careful thing, is insuremytrip.com, which is, it makes me think of whatever that one site is with the commercial with the puppet talking about going to a bank and getting a mortgage. That site is.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember what the site is.
Me neither, but that whole thing.
Your advertising's not working, folks. We can't remember what the site is.
Well, that's the thing often with advertising. Is like, I remember the commercial and have no idea about the product.
Yeah.
Or the company, whatever. But that whole thing of going to one site and getting sort of comparable rates for things, this for travel insurance. Because most people would agree travel insurance, despite, how much you think, oh, I'll never need it, I'll never use it, it's just a waste of money. Good idea to actually have.
Yeah, especially if you're going out of the country, I would think. You know, you want to have a sense of security if you're going out of the country, because you're in unfamiliar territory and who knows what could happen.
Right. But you can also even have travel insurance just for like if you have to cancel your trip for some reason to get your money back. So even if you're not going out of the country, if you're going like across the country, because America is a big country, and be like, oh, I'm going to New York for a week, and then, oh, that whole thing gets canceled, and I've already spent however much money, how do I get my money back? Oh, hey, look, I have this travel insurance thing. That's good. So insuremytrip.com is that one sort of, you go to one site and see multiple quotes. I'm going to call it the Progressive of
I was
travel
just thinking
insurance.
that.
That's not the ad from the puppet, but that's the one I can remember the name of.
Let me see if I can find the ad with the puppet.
Because clearly Flo has been doing a much better job than the puppet who sits in his underwear.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. I can be in my underwear.
So it's that for travel insurance. It's designed to help you compare benefits, get quotes, buy policies, and save from top-rated carriers. And it does have both sort of the big name carriers, though I don't know too much about travel insurance, so the only one I recognized was Berkshire Hathaway. And I was just like, wait, isn't that Warren Buffett? Warren Buffett does travel insurance?
It is Lending Tree. I was going to say Lending Tree, but I didn't think. And it's really sad. If you type in puppet, I-N, puppet insurance commercial comes, just, auto-populates. We're not the only ones that have looked in
for puppet
insurance commercial. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Lending Tree.
Sorry, Lending Tree. Just Flo's been around
I actually
longer.
did remember what it was, but I didn't trust myself. So, your advertising's only kind of working.
I only remembered the puppet in his boxers.
Yes.
So anyways, Insure My Trip, the representatives they have working for them are non-commissioned, which I like, because I'm always really wary of people who I was like, okay, but are you selling me that because that's what's best for me? Or are you selling me that because that will get you the highest commission?
Exactly.
Like I never want to go to a car lot. I was just like, stay away, sharks. It's the sharks. They smell blood. Oh. Seriously, they come up to you immediately. It's like, go away. But also, they calculate your sort of quote rates based off of the travel details you give them. So things like your destination, your travel dates, the ages of the travelers, as well as any sort of specific coverage needs you might need if you're like really wary about what if I like have a medical emergency and need to come back and don't suddenly have the money immediately to do that. Or
do they give you different levels of coverage for like I want to go parasailing, or, like you're really adventurous, or I'm just going to sit in the hotel and read a book.
Right. Yes, they do. Because you put that in of, I'm more concerned over the property versus I'm more concerned over like my body and broken bones or whatever. There was one I saw when I was looking at it. There were people who also sort of, they posted people's questions that they posted and then sort of like the things they'd recommend for that. And so one of them was like, just because this is kind of topical at the time we're recording this, her son was going to Japan, but they were a little worried because of North Korea. So if they had to cancel really quickly, what would be the best thing for that? And there's something like cancel my trip coverage or something like that to do that if you have to cancel your trip right away. And so I was like, okay.
Pretty much, I'm just guaranteeing that whatever I feel like I don't need, and I'm like, no, I don't need to get that insurance, that's what I'm going to need. And I'll be like, crap, I don't have that.
Well, I'm always super terrified, like, when I've had to rent cars, because on the one hand, I'm like, I don't want to pay the insurance because I'm already paying however much. On the other hand, if I do, crash your rental car, crap, that's a lot of money. So, yeah, let me pay the whatever extra insurance that I literally never used before.
Yes. Yep.
So, yes.
Big sigh.
Why big sigh?
I don't know, just big sigh over not having the right insurance. Not being a puppet in my underwear. I don't know.
Well, on that really, bright and optimistic note,
yay!
We're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.